diving into some seriously fascinating history today, huh?
Hmm.
It's all about those early days of Jewish immigration to the land of Israel. Like late 19th, early 20th century, that whole era.
Definitely a pivotal time.
Totally. And it's often,
Yeah.
simplified. Just boom, homecoming, story over. But trust me, there's so much more to it. We're talking resilience, innovation, the sheer guts it took to build a homeland from, well, basically nothing.
Absolutely.
Our guide for this deep dive is this super compelling piece by Laozi Portal. It's called, get this, Everything I Had, I Left Behind. There is no going back.
Wow, the title alone, right? It just hits you. You really get a sense of like the desperation, but also this unwavering hope these immigrants carried with them.
No kidding.
Mm.
And Portal does this amazing job painting a picture of where they were coming from. Tsarist Russia, late 1800s. Imagine just persecution, hardship, you can't catch a break.
You really have to understand that context. This wasn't just about like individuals looking for a leg up.
Right.
These were entire communities fleeing, like desperately seeking a place to actually belong.
And for many, that place was the land of Israel, of course, back then under Ottoman rule. But as Portal describes it, getting to this promised land, it wasn't all sunshine and roses.
Not even close. Imagine, often they arrive with almost nothing.
Literally.
Just the clothes on their backs, and they're landing in a place that's already got all these different communities, ways of life.
And then you add challenges on top of challenges. Portal talks about this housing crisis in cities like Jerusalem, Jaffa.
Exactly. It's this stark reminder that even with all the hope for a better future, actually making that new life is way more complicated.
Out of the frying pan into the fire kind of thing.
In a way, yeah. And here's another layer. The Ottoman Empire itself is a whole mess at this point, right? Like, major transformations going on.
Oh, right.
Portal talks about these Ottoman reforms, how they just threw fuel on the fire, creating all this tension between social classes. You've got the wealthy Muslim landowners, the Arab peasants working the land. It's just volatile.
So it's like this whole powder keg, existing tensions, a crumbling empire, and then bam, this wave of new arrivals, all crammed into this, let's be honest, relatively small piece of land.
Exactly. A recipe for, well, let's just say it makes for some fascinating history.
To say the least. Okay, but here's where things get even more interesting. Portal mentions these things called, get this, capitulations. Basically, loopholes, legal ones, that let wealthy European Jews buy land in the Ottoman Empire.
This is where you see those global forces at play, right on the ground.
How so?
So these capitulations, they were agreements between the Ottomans and European powers, and they gave Europeans special privileges within the empire, like, say, the right to buy land.
So even though the Ottomans were, technically in charge, these individuals, these organizations, they could come in and, just buy up land?
Pretty much. And this was huge for the Zionist movement, for establishing those early settlements.
Wow. So these little legal details end up having massive consequences. It makes you wonder, what if they hadn't existed?
Right. It just shows you history is unpredictable. Little things can snowball.
It's not just the big names and dates from the textbooks.
Exactly. It's all connected. And as we get deeper into these settlements, you'll see even more of those connections.
So we've got this whole wave of immigrants, right, arriving in a new land, a land full of challenges, obviously, but also all this potential, and driving them this crazy mix of hope and just sheer determination.
And that's where the moshavot comes in. Seriously, a remarkable chapter in this whole story.
Okay, so level with me here. For those of us who, haven't exactly been cramming on early Zionist history, what exactly is a moshavot?
Basically, it was a whole new model for rural settlement, totally different from those traditional villages that already existed in Palestine.
I see.
The article, it talks about how these moshavot, that's the plural, by the way, how they were all about self-sufficiency, like agricultural innovation, reviving Jewish culture.
So not just your average farm settlements then?
Oh, no. Way more than that. They were almost like social experiments, trying out different ways of living communally, owning land, producing agriculture.
Interesting. Portal does a really good job, I think, of making these settlements come alive. She talks about the architecture.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, this blend of practicality, but also their cultural identity.
Mm-hmm.
They use local materials, stone, mud, but then incorporated those European influences too, like in the layout, the design.
It's like this tangible expression of their heritage, right? Holding on to tradition while adapting to this whole new environment.
Speaking of adapting, it couldn't have been easy. We're talking essentially turning desert land into thriving communities.
Yeah.
That takes serious grit.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The article doesn't sugarcoat it. They faced hardship after hardship.
Like what?
Harsh climate, obviously. Resources were limited. There's always the threat of disease. And then you've got resistance from the Ottoman authorities on top of it all.
Yeah, it's easy to romanticize the past.
Yeah.
But the reality was probably way tougher than we can imagine.
Totally. These were people, families who had risked everything for the chance at something better. And they just face it all head on. Such resilience, such ingenuity. It's pretty remarkable.
You know, what gets me is, even with all that hardship, they didn't just survive, they innovated. Portal mentions how they took traditional farming techniques and adapted them to this new environment.
Oh, yeah, they had to.
Were there any specific innovations that they were known for?
The article mentions these water sharing systems they developed, absolutely crucial in that
Yeah.
climate. And they experimented with different crops, different farming methods, pulling from their own knowledge, but also always learning new things.
So there's like this fusion of old and new.
Exactly. You see that theme a lot in this period, trying to bridge their heritage with this new reality, and always with an eye towards the future they were trying to build.
Really speaks to their, dynamism, their adaptability.
Absolutely. But it also highlights those inherent challenges. I mean, you're building a new society in a land that's both familiar and completely foreign.
It makes you wonder how they navigated all that, especially with the Ottoman authorities breathing down their necks the whole time.
That's a key part of this whole story. The article hints at the Ottoman Empire's, well, let's just say they weren't exactly thrilled about this influx of immigrants building these independent communities.
So there's this tension simmering beneath the surface.
Oh, yeah. The empire's already dealing with its own problems, and then you've got this new, potentially disruptive force to deal with.
Right, right.
And it's against this backdrop, all this resilience, innovation, simmering tensions, that a new figure enters the picture. Baron Edmund de Rothschild.
Ah, the Baron. Yeah, Portal kind of leaves us hanging there, mentions him right at the end.
Because Rothschild's arrival, well, it adds a whole new layer of complexity to this story.
All right, so we're back, and things are about to get really interesting. Last time, we left off with these incredibly brave souls carving out a new life for themselves in the land of Israel. And man, they faced some serious challenges, but they kept going with this incredible, tenacity.
Yeah, their resilience is amazing. And just when they're starting to figure things out, along comes Baron Edmund de Rothschild.
Right. Portal, she doesn't really go into a ton of detail in this piece, but she definitely gets you curious about this guy. So help us out. Who is Baron Rothschild, and why does his name keep popping up in this story?
Okay, picture this. You're one of those settlers, right? Working the land, sun up to sundown, just to barely get by. Life is tough. And suddenly, this super wealthy philanthropist swoops in, and he's offering more than just money. He's got this whole vision, this plan to transform everything.
Okay, I mean, that sounds like you just won the lottery, but I'm guessing there's a but coming.
Of course there's a but. History is full of them, right? Rothschild, yeah, he was incredibly generous, but his involvement, well, it wasn't always simple. He had very strong opinions about how these settlements should be run.
Oh, so it wasn't as hands-off as it seemed.
Not really. See, Rothschild, he favored this large-scale European-style approach to agriculture. Big, sprawling farms. But some of the settlers, they were experimenting with different methods, more diversified stuff.
Ah, so it's less about empowering them, more about, imposing his vision.
It's a bit more nuanced than that. Remember, these settlements, they were really up against it, just trying to survive. Rothschild's money, it meant stability, resources, access to markets, all things they desperately needed.
Okay, I see the dilemma. It's like, you accept the help, but then you risk losing some of your independence. But if you go it alone, you might just lose everything.
Exactly. It's a classic trade-off, and it's one that honestly pops up again and again throughout history. How do you balance needing help from outside with that desire to control your own destiny? Even today, it's something countries are wrestling with.
It makes you think about what it really means to build a nation, you know? It's not just about the physical stuff, the buildings, the field. It's about those relationships, about making tough choices, figuring out who you are in the process.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And when it comes to these early settlements, there's no doubt Rothschild's involvement, it left a mark. Socially, economically, even just looking at the physical landscape, you can see his influence.
It's like this microcosm of what any group striving for independence has to go through. The push and pull between what you dream of internally and then those external forces that are always at play.
Exactly. And it just highlights that history is never black and white, never a straight line. It's messy, it's complicated.
Full of surprises, dead ends, and those moments of just pure human resilience that somehow shine through. And on that note, we're going to leave you, dear listener, with one final thought. Portal's article, it gives us this amazing glimpse into a crucial moment in history. But like so much of history, it raises more questions than it answers.
Oh, absolutely. Like, how did these early settlements, shaped by both their own hard work and this outside influence, how did they change over time? How did they survive, let alone thrive, in such a complex, often volatile region?
Those are definitely questions for another deep dive. But for now, we hope you've come away with a deeper understanding of the people behind the history we're talking about, the dreams they held on to, the challenges they faced, and that incredible spirit that allowed them to not just build a nation, but to lay the foundation for something truly